Oh, you mean? I think it's
Oh,
the Howard Bar has liquor license.
yeah.
Magisters have liquor license. The Schneller
Did you
does.
knock the other two out, or what?
I don't know what they're doing, but
Mr.
they're
Becker?
somehow working
What?
it out.
What'd you do with the other two council people?
Lost them.
You lost them, huh?
They were here.
Between here and there? They probably hit the bathroom.
They went the other way. I take the
There's
short.
Eileen, there they are.
Okay. Okay.
And the plaque in the committee room is still up.
We're going to do picture.
Yeah.
Because it's had batteries in it.
Have fun?
Yeah, no, wasn't that exciting?
Okay. Ken passed this out to all of us.
What's that?
He'll explain it later.
Just so that you know. Yeah, I'm ready.
Yeah, let's go ahead.
I'd like to call this regular meeting of the Common Council of the City of Platteville to order on Tuesday, May 8th, 2012 at 7:06 p.m. We'll begin with roll call.
Ken Killian,
Here.
Mike Delecky,
Here.
Patrice Steiner,
Here.
Steve Becker,
Here.
Barb Doss,
Here.
Eileen Nichols,
Here.
Dick Bonin.
Here.
Thank you. First item on the agenda tonight is a public hearing regarding ordinance 12-16 with regard to repealing and recreating section 22.10 regarding modifications and exceptions, specifically height limitations and yard requirements. This is a public hearing. If you would like to speak in favor, against, or in general, please fill out a form and hand it to Kathy Martin up front. We'll begin the staff presentation.
Okay, the zoning ordinance provides restrictions on buildings when they're constructed. It basically creates an allowable building envelope that the building can occupy on a site through the setback and height requirements through the basic zoning districts. In addition to that, section 2210 basically provides exceptions to those rules within the districts for certain extensions of buildings or certain structures to exceed those setback requirements or height requirements. I guess a couple of items through the years of administering this ordinance, either through just interpretation of the ordinance for different projects or through applications that people have submitted for variances to these requirements. Staff has kind of developed a list of proposed or recommended changes to this section to address some of the items that have come up over the years. Basically, a lot of them, as I mentioned, are interpretation that the way it's written now has resulted in some problems in administering it. For example, the height restriction allows you to go as tall as 50 feet for certain items, but it says it cannot exceed in height the distance from the nearest lot line. Well, the downtown business district, you can be right up to the lot line. So any structure that's built is going to exceed in height the distance from the lot line. So obviously, if you put a chimney on top of the existing height, you're not going to be able to meet that requirement. And we've had other issues with interpretation. Flagpoles have always been kind of a unaddressed issue that needs to be clarified. We've had variance requests for church steeples. 50 feet really isn't very tall when you start talking about a church steeple. And then we've had some other mechanical special structures that have required variances, and it seemed like each time it came through, the Board of Appeals kind of easily approved it and kind of questioned why that needed to be an item that needed to be a variance, and it couldn't just be addressed in the ordinance. And then there were some other items. The way the code is written now, it treats uncovered stairs, landings, fire escapes differently than a porch or a deck. And there's a lot of question what exactly is the difference between them when we've had certain projects where it's hard to determine, is it a porch or is it a deck and so forth. So we're proposing some changes to the ordinance to address those types of questions. The first one, A1, we, as far as the height, we are proposing to get rid of the 50-foot maximum height for certain projections to buildings. Basically, they would be exempt from the height limitations, but in return, we're limiting the amount of area that that structure can cover as far as the building, and it cannot be used as habitable space. So it's not a loophole to add an additional floor to that building. It just allows for certain extensions to that. A2 is a similar train of thought. A lot of these structures are likely going to be freestanding structures or separate from the building, so the same type of restriction, no height limitation, but it limits to the 25% of the area, and also it has to meet the setback requirements of the principal structure. The public, semi-public facilities under A5, again, we're providing some clarification. Basically, the way it was worded before was a little bit confusing, I think. The proposed language says basically they can go taller, but the taller they get, the farther the setback needs to be. The yard requirements were changing. Basically, as I mentioned, there was two different sections on covered decks, porches, stairs, and so forth. We're proposing to combine those requirements together and treat them the same. We've had several variance requests over the years for handicapped access ramps. Personally, I don't think anybody should need a variance to get access into their own home, so we have an exception to that. And then otherwise, flag poles were identified in both sections as an exception to that. So that's the summary of the proposed changes. I would point out I did provide an updated copy of the proposed ordinance on your desk this evening, and with one change. We added one word the back under B1. We just added the word required for clarification. That was a typo on my part, so that would be the proposed ordinance that we would recommend adoption of this evening. Any questions?
What is the height limitation, I should have looked it up, in the central business district? Is it 75 feet,
50 feet,
50 feet?
right.
And the other ones are generally 35 feet?
25 or 35
Yeah.
residential and commercial.
Then I had a question, clarification on A height 5. What is meant by stations, governmental offices and stations?
I interpret that as fire stations or police stations.
Oh, okay, okay.
Why, under B1, you added the word required? What,
Because
what
it's
does that mean?
the required,
But it added, I guess, is what I'm trying to,
for instance, if the required rear yard setback is 25 feet, but you happen to have 50 feet, the way it was worded without that is you can only go out 15 feet. Or what's the distance in there? 15 feet. Well, if you have more than that before you even get to your setback, then you don't need this exception, but it implies that you can only have a deck 15 feet even
No,
though
10,
you've got
10,
10.
10.
Right. So the whole intent of this is that it allows certain exceptions into the required setback. But if you've got more than that on your property, well, you can build up to that required setback as
Think of
much
it this way,
distance as
Steve.
you've got.
If you wanted to have a deck that was wider than 10 feet, if it, even though it didn't project into a setback of a yard, you wouldn't be able to do it. Even though you had 50 feet worth of yard behind it. You see what I'm saying?
fine.
I have a question on A2. The question I have is, why did you choose 25% of the total area? Seems to me like we wouldn't want special structures like gas tanks and grain elevators to cover 25%. I mean, why? That seems like a large amount of a yard.
Well, to be totally honest, I found another example of a community that had that language and I borrowed it. I was thinking more along the lines of a manufacturing facility where they could easily have a special type of a structure that could exceed 25% of the lot area.
Grain elevators?
Yeah. I mean, that's just like I said, a number I had obtained from a different code, but if you feel comfortable with a different number, I'm open to suggestions.
So what you're telling me is this applies to the industrial park as well?
Yep. This is through the whole city as far as any zoning district.
Do you want to try a different number, or are you comfortable
Well,
with it?
I guess in that it applies to the industrial park, I can understand if you had cooling towers and other kinds of things, it could, and you had some kind of storage elevator or storage silo,
Right.
it could perhaps exceed or be at 25%. I guess I was thinking residential, and I was thinking, we certainly wouldn't want residential property that's covered 25% by any of those things. I guess that's fine.
I don't have any other questions. No other questions?
I just wondered, Joe, under B, yards, number 3, architectural projections such as chimneys, flues, sills, eaves, and belt courses. What are belt courses?
When you have brickwork, it's kind of the decorative brick that extends out, kind of like a lintel on certain older buildings, where you have the main wall, and then certain areas are built out to extend further from the wall.
So it's a decorative.
Correct.
Okay.
Moving right along.
Anything else?
And you have, crossed out windmills, ag structures such as barns, silos, and windmills. Does that mean windmills are not allowed anywhere?
The state passed a new law not too long ago, actually a long time ago, and it just went back into effect regarding windmills. So if we're going to regulate those, we're going to need a different ordinance.
Okay. That's all I have.
Any other questions? Okay. Moving ahead, we have no one's indicated public statements in favor. Michael Mayo's indicated he'd like to speak against, so please move to the microphone, state your name and address, and let us know what's on your mind.
Michael Mayo, 375 South Chestnut Street here in Platteville. First of all, I have to commend Council President Delecky in all the meetings that I have come to, and knowing that he has the media in front of him. It's the first time you've ever addressed the media to inform them of anything.
Do you have any comments, sir, about the
Yes, I do.
ordinance? Okay.
I have some clarifications I'd like to know. With regards to this particular ordinance, I have just about an acre and a half land behind my home. Means to tell me I can't put a deck more than 10 feet behind my home? Is that what I'm hearing?
No, that was the reason we had to add the word required, so that you wouldn't have that problem. You can build up as far as your lot line goes till you reach that limitation of not closer than 15 feet.
All right, because
To
that's
your
what I
lot.
heard before, 10 feet, and that's it. I just wanted to clarify that. And I know I'm not the only one who was kind of like saying, what? I have the property to use. If I wanted to use it, I can. Is that what that's what I'm hearing now?
Correct.
Not from your 10 feet.
You can have a copy of my ordinance if you'd like one.
That'd be great. That's all I have to say at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you. There were no public statements in general council discussion. Is there a motion to close the public hearing?
So move.
Second?
Motion is second, Dawson, Killian. Roll call vote to close the public hearing, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Galecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Bonin.
Yes.
Thank you. Common council action.
I make a motion, we approve.
second,
Motion and a second. Is that including the one-word change?
Correct.
Required?
Yep.
Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Galecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Bonin.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Motion carried.
I'd like to apologize tonight, too. I'm fighting allergies pretty well, so if I fade out from time to time or lose my voice, that's why. Next on the agenda tonight is consideration of the consent calendar. The following items may be approved on a single motion and vote due to their routine nature of previous discussion. Please indicate if you prefer separate discussion and action. Item A is the minutes of the 4/17 and 4/24 council meetings. Item B is payment of bills. Item C is the April financial report. Item D is appointments to boards and commissions. One thing that I'd like to do with regard to the committee assignments for the council is due to scheduling issues that Patrice and I will swap, community development and museum. Also, with regard to appointments, Mary Miller to the Board of Appeals, ET Zoning. Amy Seaboth to the Board of Appeals, ET Zoning. Dorothy Genthy to Community Development Board. John Schleichman to Community Safe Routes. Jeff Rowles to the Friedenreich Animal Trust Care Fund. Deb Jenny to the Housing Authority. Brian Laufenberg to the Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Committee. John Miller to the Plan Commission. And April Fuhr to the Police and Fire Commission. We also have licenses, 1 and/or 2-year operators licenses for premises licensed to traffic and fermented malt beverages, intoxicating liquors. Item F, ordinance 12-17, repealing and recreating section 5.01 weeds with several subsections. G is resolution 12-15, establishing administrative charge for section 5.01 weeds. Is there any item on which you'd prefer separate discussion and action?
I'd like to have separate discussion on F and G.
Okay.
I move for approval for the remainder.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. F and G, would you give us a rundown of what we're doing there and what the story
Actually,
is?
I'd like to ask the city attorney to handle this one.
We're in the process of time of year now to start mowing weeds, and wanted to took a look at the weed ordinance and wanted to clarify some of the references that are made to state statutes, update them to include the current reference, make it clear that the definition of noxious weeds included grass and weeds that exceeded, I believe, 8 inches. And make sure that as we go forward into this mowing season, that we're in firm ground in processing tall grass complaints.
So this also brings us into conformity with the state law so that the language is
Language is
consistent?
now updated to reflect changes made. It's been a while in terms of code references, and we just looked at that and decided, let's get this tidied up before we proceed any further this summer.
The
I
sec-
had a question about the $40 fee, it says to be adjusted by resolution adopted by the common council. Is that specified in this ordinance also, or is that some other place?
It's the next page is the resolution in yellow. And the reason we do that
Okay,
is so that
yellow,
we can update
Okay.
the fee without having to publish the entire ordinance in the paper.
okay. That's the present fee,
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
yep. Thank you.
I have two questions. This references a weed commissioner.
Yes.
Who is our weed commissioner?
By definition, it is me as the Director of Public Works. It's in our ordinances.
Okay. I just didn't go back and look. And then it says, in section 4, it repealing section 5, so it repeals this administrative charge shall be added to bills. How do we collect this? That's my question.
The physical way that this happens is when our contractor mows a property, they send their bill to us, we verify it, and then we, through the finance department, we send the bill to the property owner with a $40 is what the current administrative charge is for staff time to implement this ordinance, and then the finance department collects the bill.
Okay, so it's $40 plus the cost of cutting the grass.
That's
correct?
correct.
And but it says here, added to bills.
Contract.
So is it added, if somebody doesn't pay it all year long, then is it added to their tax bill as a special
Yes.
assessment?
That's correct. If they do not pay that, then it gets added to the tax roll
As, added to the tax
Special
bill
charge.
as a special assessment?
as a special charge.
Charge.
And where, I mean, is that defined in some other ordinance or resolution, or?
Look at section 3 of the ordinance, 501E.
Shall be placed on tax rolls.
That's the technical language that is required in order to place it on the,
Bill.
on the tax bill as a special charge.
Okay, so it's placed on as a special charge, not as a special assessment.
Special assessment is a different classification of a special charge. This is a special charge for services rendered to a specific property, and there's a specific code section that says that's okay.
So if they choose not to pay that, let's say, what ends up happening?
They choose not to pay their tax bill,
Right,
they end up losing their property.
okay, so. Are we gonna have any difficulty enforcing any of that this year?
I have not had any issues. People come up and they complain about it, but we have procedures in place to prove that they were in violation and that we mowed it.
I have a general question. When you look back 10 years, has the amount of weed mowing decreased as far as what the city has had to enforce?
I don't have those numbers at this point. I would think that the numbers have increased since the Common Council has directed staff to be more proactive in reviewing and enforcing such code violations. If you want more specific information, I'll have to do the research.
Well, I based my question on observation of two properties that, from what I can see, they're no longer mowed by the city or enforced by the city. The owners are doing the work.
Well, that's the idea.
These were significant sizes of property.
Other questions? Mr. Mayo has indicated he'd like to speak to these issues, and since we pulled them off for separate discussion and action, why not?
Michael Mayo, 375 South Chestnut. I understand that a fee of $40 plus the fee for cost for doing the mowing. Does this also mean the city's property? Is not the city, right now, the city is in violation of their own problem as far as weeds. And I have the documentation for you. Would you like to see this?
Not particularly. If you know of any places where we haven't quite gotten to it yet, if you'd let our weed commissioner know, I'm sure we'll get to it.
I think everybody should understand that right by our EMS building, the weeds are growing like crazy over there. Right by our library, it hasn't been mowed in weeks, more than 2 weeks. And right down at the end of South Chestnut Street, right by the fire hydrant down there, weeds are growing like crazy. What's the city going to do? Find themselves?
Well, we would kind of probably hope that if there was something lax, a citizen might just mention it to somebody so it'll get taken care of.
Well, I think
Generally
if
what
you're
happens.
enforcing the code and had the city council is turning around and having this code enforced, they should do due diligence of their own and take a look at the properties that the city owns so that the city can take care of itself.
Mr. President, I'll have staff look at that as soon as possible.
If anybody cares to, I have the documentation right here, and they can view what I'm talking about.
I don't think anybody thinks you're lying. I mean, we just hope that if somebody sees something like that, they would just bring it to our attention. I don't
Well,
think it needs to be a
again,
federal
if
case.
you're if this council is telling everybody and putting pressure on the staff to make sure that this is taken care of, I would believe that the council themselves would monitor their own requirements.
Well,
And that is on city property.
It's not on a tree island.
Excuse me?
It's not on a tree island.
No, it's not.
Mr. Mayo, if you would leave the pictures with me, I'd be happy to get that enforced for you and get that mowed.
Oh,
Thank you.
Perhaps we could clarify something. If we have somebody who has a property that needs to be mowed, don't we give them notice first?
Yes, sir.
So that they have a chance to resolve it on their own before they get any fees or anything else. And so if there's some place where our maintenance is a little bit lax, and as I'm sure you know, Mr. Mayo, given the budget constraints that we're under right now, we're trying to get by
Excuse me.
with less.
Let's
Excuse me.
not
I don't
go
inter-
into
Mr. Mayo,
budget
please.
constraints.
Mr. Mayo, I didn't interrupt you. I would appreciate something approximating the same consideration in return.
I will give you all the due diligence that you're entitled to.
Given our current budget circumstances, it's not unreasonable, we may miss a few places. It would be helpful if citizens, rather than doing certain kind of approaches, would simply help us out. It's everybody's city, it's not just ours.
I'm glad you brought up the item of budget and lack of personnel and what have you. Was it at this council that turned around and cut $107,000 from the budget by curtailing our staff here in City Hall and the staff throughout the city in all departments? Was it at this same council that turned around, but maybe 3 weeks later, and hired a communications director for some $70,000? And what other personnel have been put onto the city's roll that have already eliminated this quote-unquote savings of $107,000?
Mike, didn't we come up here to talk about the weed thing?
We were talking about the weed thing, and he brought up another item that is very, very important to me.
Okay, then maybe we should talk about that under another context. We have a lot of business to get to tonight, and I'm sure folks watching would prefer that we do that.
I think the folks watching would like to know how their $107,000 was thrown away.
This item's not on the agenda.
If you would, please.
I move adoption of ordinance 1217, repealing and recreating section 5.01 weeds, subsection A, B, E, and F, and Resolution 1215, establishing an administrative charge for Section 5.01 weeds.
Second.
A motion and a second. Since this was consideration, let's do a voice vote. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. That motion carries. Moving on tonight, citizens' comments and observations and petitions, if any. No one has indicated a desire to speak. Moving on to reports.
Council
Go ahead.
President Delecky, I
Yeah.
would like to inform the council that the RDA has been meeting and has taken up the issue of parking in the downtown area. We have had 2 special meetings and will have a 3rd special meeting this Thursday addressing that issue. It is our goal to bring some plan to the council during, by midsummer, I'm going to say, relative to kind of the allocation of parking in the downtown area and how we might improve use there.
Okay.
I have a question. Are you gonna have, maybe you're not to that point of deciding yet, are you gonna have some spaces allocated for long-term parking from various
That-
lots?
That would be our goal, and
And
perhaps
then-
by the next council meeting, I can come with a report. Like I said, we've had about 3 special meetings already.
And these would be spaces that could be leased by employees or tenants?
Right.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to reports, committee reports, police and fire. I have nothing to add to the minutes in the packet. Parks, Forestry, and Recreation Committee? I don't think we had anybody. I think that was John. Museum Board?
Nothing to add.
Commission on Aging?
I haven't been to a meeting yet. That'll be,
And I was, and I have nothing to add.
Okay. Wonderful. Other reports, airport, April financial report, the water and sewer expenditures and revenues report for April, the city attorney itemized statement for April, department progress reports. Are there any items in there on which you have questions or would like to make commentary?
I would like to state that our room tax revenue is up for the first quarter of 2012, which is a good sign. It's up higher than the last 2 years' first quarters. So our hotel rooms are being checked out a lot more.
Okay. Moving on then to action items. Item A under action is ordinance 12-18, repealing and recreating section 41.18, prohibiting the possession of marijuana or other specified controlled substances and the possession, manufacture, or delivery of drug paraphernalia, and amending section 1.10, schedule of cash deposits. Should we ask the weed commissioner to weigh in on this one? I've been waiting all night for that. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I think this is a team effort between the police chief and the city attorney. If one of you would like to take this, introduce the item.
Thank you. This ordinance is basically giving our officers another tool to address situations in which the situation may not allow us to pursue criminal charges, or something in which the DA would elect not to pursue criminal charges. And it also allows us to write a municipal citation in situations in which paraphernalia is present, but no actual controlled substance.
So it'll give you more flexibility.
Yes, another tool in the toolbox.
So the way it is now, Doug, then they would be arrested and it would be forwarded to the DA, is that right?
Typically, what would happen, yes, but some of them, the amount is so minuscule, or there are other matters that the DA does not elect to pursue charges, and so that a municipal citation is more appropriate.
And is that like a ticket, a fine?
Correct.
Other questions?
The amount of forfeiture, does that go to the city, or is that shared with the county or state?
It's split.
Second question is, that happens with traffic, correct? Traffic citations?
With all of them, they are divvied out according to, some goes to the court system, some to the city. I
That's
mean,
gonna happen here also for this one?
Yes.
Anything else?
Move adoption of this section, repealing and recreating section 41.18 of the municipal code regarding the possession of marijuana and other controlled substances, as well as amending section 1.10, schedule of cash deposits.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Dalecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Bonin.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item B under action is Resolution 12-16, amending the paid lunchtime provisions in the employee handbook, specifically personnel policy, rules, and regulations. City Manager Berkey, if you would. brief us on
Certainly.
that.
We recently approved a new employee handbook in December of 2011, and as a result of that, a specific section was brought to our attention that there was a federal law that requires employees who are not allowed to leave their desk or not allowed to take a break for lunch be compensated for their time on the job. Our current employee handbook states that all employees must take a half-hour unpaid lunch. So we need to bring that language back into compliance with the federal laws. Included in your packet are copies of the summaries for the laws as to how it relates to our employees.
So just as a clarification, excuse me, it says employees, primarily dispatchers will be compensated. So are we saying only dispatchers, or will there be other employees that this may also affect?
There may be other employees. What we're aware of for sure are the dispatchers. What happens is that we schedule a dispatcher for an 8-hour shift. They need to be by the phones for emergency calls, so they can't walk away from their desk or go down to a restaurant for a half hour during the day. Therefore, because work requires them to be present, we do have to compensate them for that time. There may be other employees that this applies to, but offhand, none come to mind.
Is this the employee's choice or the supervisor's choice? And how is,
State law requires that municipalities pay employees
I
who are
understand.
unable to leave their office or desk. It's the employer's choice as to whether or not to require you to be at the office or at the workstation. In some situations, like the dispatchers, it makes sense for us to require them to be there, as opposed to bringing in an employee for half an hour to cover lunch breaks. So it is the employer's decision whether or not we require an employee to be at their desk.
okay, toward that, would it be possible then for you in your next council information to include any other employees who are required to be at their desks other than the dispatchers?
Yeah, I believe I could.
Fine, thank you.
Any other questions? Care to make a motion?
I move to approve the resolution amending the employee handbook on the subject of lunch breaks.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Dalecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Bonin.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item C tonight is permit parking on streets near UW Platteville. City Manager Berkey, is that you, or
Yes.
is a brief synopsis?
Certainly. City Council has discussed this briefly in the past. What we're talking about is trying to, if you take a look at the map in there, what we've talked about is the idea of setting aside specific city streets and asking the university to do permits on those streets so that it's considered part of the university parking plan. In exchange, then the university would compensate us for the rights to issue parking permits on those streets. The map in your packet identifies the streets. The streets are the same as what is included in a previous agreement we have with the university regarding snow removal. So it's basically the baseline for our relationship as it develops in the future. I'm hoping that this is the first step and that in future years we can begin looking at other streets or additional streets to add to this relationship. but this is meant to be a starting point for the city council and the school and the university to work together.
Somewhere in here, and I'm sorry, I can't find it right now, but I thought it said something about the city would be putting up the signs noting that it's a permitted parking area. And I'm just wondering what the cost of those signs are.
Maybe Howard could help. I believe it's about $30 a sign and 20 a post. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I was gonna say about $50 for the sign and the post,
Okay.
give or take.
And how many will we be putting up? Do you have any idea?
I do not.
I don't know that at this point.
There would also be staff time in addition to that.
Are we sharing the cost with the university on that?
I still have to negotiate an agreement if this is a route you want to go, and that's certainly something I could try to negotiate on our behalf.
I think it would be reasonable that we share the cost.
Certainly.
I think in your original information, you indicated a split of revenue and citation of 50-50? Revenue from permit sales and revenue from citations?
It was just citation revenue. The permit revenue in the original concept would be to support the university's parking, and then they would issue us a check for $20,000 for the first year. And then after that, we anticipated it would go up. All of that is completely out the window at this point because the number of streets included has been substantially cut in half. So I'm not sure what dollar amount we'd be looking at or who would be responsible for putting up signs. At this point, I think I'm just looking for direction from the council as to whether you want me to go forward and bring back an agreement. I think it's $20,000 is probably on the high end considering our reduction in the number of streets.
Well, it may not be, because Ken did this informal survey and
That can
something
be
like that
figured
would
out on the
support
basis
more.
of number of parking spaces available.
And it may be somewhat more than that.
Pardon?
It may be somewhat more than 20. There's just based on the map he gave from
Would that
last
come up with
time,
326 interior?
something like that, something close to that.
I don't want to mislead the council. There's no indication from the university that we're going to get compensated for every individual parking stall. So no matter how many stalls there are, I don't know that that's going to be equal to the amount that we're going to get from the university. I'm sure they're going to take administrative costs off of that, the costs of selling permits. Obviously, this is something that I think needs to be negotiated. If you believe that 20,000 is the drop dead, the thing that needs to be in the agreement, then I would like to ask the city council, maybe there's a member on the council that would like to join me in the negotiations to make sure that your viewpoint is heard.
Well, I think I mentioned this before. I think it needs to be considered as far as the cost that the city is incurring as far as putting up all these street signs for Roundtree Commons. I mean, each of those is what, Howard, $40, $50?
I thought we were talking about the Roundtree Commons idea is a separate issue. This is
Yes,
okay.
yes, but the money has to come from someplace to pay for those signs, and that's staff time.
Yep.
And
It's-
this is, to me, a source of funding for that.
I think I'm going to be very challenged to suggest to the university that we need to get compensated for an agreement that already occurred under this new agreement.
I don't, go, Barb, go ahead.
I'd like to talk about parking for just a minute, and as I said, the RDA has taken up parking, and parking, I've spent several hours, other members of the RDA have spent several hours interviewing people, reading articles about parking and what have you. In essence, in a city, your parking is like for lack of a better word, like a balloon. If you push on it one place, something happens someplace else. And I understand what Ken is saying. I don't think that he's saying that this agreement should directly compensate for what happened at Roundtree, but in that parking is a system we need to look at this in a systematic way. And there are costs associated with all of the parking changes we're making, and we need to account for those costs and find ways to cover those costs. So I don't see it as an agreement that asks for compensation for something that has happened. I see any kind of parking arrangement we make as being part of a total system that has to figure out how to continue to pay the costs associated with regulating and changing parking within the city.
Well, as far as negotiating this goes, we know that this year they raised the cost of parking, and for the first time in my memory, there are empty spots on College Drive and there are empty spots on Greenwood Avenue. And so if they require parking permits to park on those interior streets, one would expect the number of cars there to drop again. How much, I don't know, and what Ken's research tells us is probably about what the maximum number of spots are, but it seems unlikely to me those will all be filled. They're not already filled now. And so it is something that, from a negotiation point of view, we probably should deal with, or perhaps have a survey partway through the year and find out exactly how many are being used. And then we'd really know what kind of revenue is being generated, because right now we're just guessing what's going to come out of there.
I have no problem with these streets being designated as regulated parking streets, permit required. I would want to understand what the compensation will be, though. These are city streets that we take care of, that we pave, that we whatever. So I have no problem with the concept, and I have no problem with the concept including these streets.
How would we like Larry to go forward with negotiating this for us? Criteria that we want him to use, or simply do the best he can and come back, or?
Perhaps he could use the RDA, which is studying parking, as a sounding board.
Well, the RDA is dealing with the downtown parking. I think this is somewhat a different issue. I mean, you certainly could use it as a sounding board, but.
Well, I think what we have in here is anticipated $20,000, may or may not happen. I think that number can stay in there. And I think that helping to pay for half the cost of the signs would be reasonable as well. That's what I would
I don't think it's
recommend at the very least.
At the very least.
At the very least.
Does the rest of the council believe that that is ground zero? So if I can't get that, then I should walk away and be done.
No, then you come
About
back
half.
and.
Well, are we sure that
tell
they're
us
not
what's
watching
there.
this on television? Because we just exposed their negotiating position
I'm
to all the
100%
world.
positive, yep.
You're talking about half the signs for
Right.
Greenwood and College.
Well, I mean,
Okay.
all this
This
is
is
in
what
writing
happens.
already, so there's no secret here. I mean, we've said $20,000 in every memo that we've had as a council member, so that's no secret. I just added the cost of the signs. And as far as, you know, if they don't agree to that, then I guess you bring something back that they are presenting, Larry, and we discuss it.
There you go.
Yeah, I think
Let's
he-
do that.
Larry needs to go forward to get an agreement and present the fact that the signs are costing us money and enforcement's gonna cost us money, and those items need to be considered.
The enforcement will be done by the university.
Yes, but I'm talking about enforcement for Roundtree Commons. That whole area too.
Right, but this
That's
is,
a cost too.
anybody care to make a motion on this?
I move to approve the concept and move forward to seek an agreement.
Second.
The motion is second.
There's a resolution here.
Right, is your motion to approve the resolution?
I move to approve the resolution.
Dick, is that what you meant by second? Okay. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Galecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
No.
Nichols,
Yes.
Bowen,
Yes.
motion carried.
Thank you. Item D tonight is the fund balance policy for the general fund relative to the Governmental Accounting Standards Board new requirements. Dwayne, you want to give us a brief synopsis of that, please? Or Larry, who's ever. Sometimes I would do this, but if I say those things, I'm gonna lose my voice.
Well, basically, they're changing the instead of having just reserved, unreserved, and designated, there's gonna be 5 classifications: non-spendable fund balance, restricted fund balance, committed fund balance, assigned fund balance, and unassigned fund balance. It's just a new requirement according to GASB, statement number 54.
I didn't hear what that last line was, Dwayne.
It's a new requirement through the Government Accounting Standards Board, statement number 54.
Oh, okay.
And our auditor will like it, is that right?
Yes, it's required that the council approve it, otherwise there'd be something written in the audit report.
I would move to approve the change.
Second to the motion.
A motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
Dwayne, will we then see that broken out in fund balance? Those 5 categories?
It'll be in the audit report that way. I've talked to the auditor and see if we have to change our own financial reports otherwise.
Okay,
Yes.
so then we would see what was in each of those.
Okay, any other questions? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Galecki.
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes,
Nichols,
Yes.
Bowen.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Item E tonight is the 2012 budget adjustment. This is for the library building fund monies.
This is staff's second attempt at trying to recover the $50,000 that we had previously budgeted to take out of the library building fund. It was decided by the city council that we would not be doing that in 2012, and the city manager was requested to find another $50,000 in the budget to make up the difference. The first attempt at that was to shift money around within the CIP and to take out the library's improvements out of the CIP 50,000. The city council did not agree with that proposal and asked the city manager to meet with the library board to discuss an alternative proposal. You'll see on the second paragraph of indented the second proposal. That is that we take advantage of a revenue source that we previously had not budgeted for. This was unexpected revenue, and it's not in the capital improvement fund, so we will have to move money around to get to it. But this is the best proposal that I could come up with. Actually, it was Dwayne Borgen and I worked on this and tried to find another 50,000. Isn't easy in a budget as tight as ours is. So I did meet with the library board to go over and talk about this. My understanding was that the library board wasn't real comfortable in telling us where to find the money, but rather just acknowledge that they did receive the notice and that they did talk about it. Does anybody have any questions?
I understand that the $50,000 was found in extra state aid for municipal services. How much additional money in state aid for municipal services did we receive in excess of what we thought we were going to receive?
As you may recall, it was in the, I brought the proposal that it was to be increased, and the council said something that they decided not to because there was a possible change at the state level. So that's why we did not budget it the way I had recommended at the time. The amount that actually we received in excess in that account, I believe it was like 70,000. I'm trying to find it here quick.
Uh,
73,316.
Yep.
Okay.
And if this 50,000 is put back in the library building fund, Dwayne, then what level, or what's the library building fund then? Is it back to 175, or what is it?
I do not have that information right here. Oh wait, I may, just a second.
Would that be in the 110?
110.
That's
be $206,319.
Those six, okay, that's good.
Care to make a motion?
Move to approve, this, transfer from municipal services, through the various accounts to, yes, the library, it's
technically-
$50,000.
It's budget amendment number 2.
Yeah, budget amendment number 2.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion or questions?
That's following the recommendations given on the bottom of the page,
Yes.
correct?
Yep.
1, 2, 3, and 4.
Anything else? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes.
Galecki, Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Bowen,
Yes.
motion carried.
Thank you. Item F tonight is a waiver to sidewalk requirement of section 22.06 paren 1 for the property at 245 East Business Highway 151. Joe?
Okay, that property has a proposed multi-tenant commercial building that hopefully will be completed this summer. The zoning ordinance has a requirement that sidewalks be installed along the frontage of all new commercial developments. That property, of any sidewalks that are needed, if there isn't sidewalks already present, that property does not have sidewalks there now. If you're familiar with it, it's a former Iowa gas station property. It's been vacant for quite a few years now. So that would require a sidewalk to be installed as part of that development. However, the code also states that the council may waive this requirement if it is determined the sidewalks are not necessary to serve pedestrian traffic, or connecting sidewalks are not present or planned for on the adjacent properties. There are no other sidewalks on that side of the highway. The nearest existing sidewalk is across the corner in front of the Dairy Queen property. We took this request to the Safe Routes Committee for their consideration at the April 16th meeting. They recommended approval of the waiver, which means they would not have to install the sidewalk, with 2 conditions: that the developer grade the land to allow for the future installation of sidewalk along the frontage of the property, and that the developer work with the Safe Routes Committee to provide a connection from this development to the existing bike pedestrian trail, which is just south of this property. They felt that was preferable to encouraging pedestrians from crossing that intersection, since it's not really designed, or facilities are not in place to allow for safe travel across that intersection. So staff would also recommend approval of the Safe Routes Committee recommendation. Are there any questions?
What would be required to have sidewalks to the area, to that shopping area, that shopping mall? Change the stoplights so we have 2 sets of walk lights there?
We would need to install pedestrian crossing signals at that intersection. Plus, we would need to modify the little pork chop islands that are there in order to allow for handicapped access for the sidewalks to go through that. It would be a relatively expensive proposition. I don't have a number at this point to be able to do that, but it would be relatively expensive. My recommendation is that we should wait to do that until such time as that intersection needs reconstruction or major improvements, and we just roll it up as a single project.
If at some point then we wish to have them put sidewalk in, who would pay for it at that time?
That would be a council decision. We would have the right to assess the property owner for the sidewalk costs if we so desired, or it could be part of a reconstruction project.
Or it could be included in this acceptance. I mean, right now, it's, the thing is contingent, I mean, it says, it's recommended that they reserve the, sidewalk, that they agree to put in sidewalks, doesn't it? Isn't that what it said? I thought that's what the,
Yeah, it says the developer will grade the land to allow for the future installation of sidewalk, but it doesn't clarify who pays for it.
we could easily add at the owner's expense.
Yeah, Because I think if we're waiving it, it's a temporary thing, and we shouldn't
Right.
have the city bear that cost later when they would normally have borne it now.
That's up to you.
I would like to note, too, the Community Safe Routes Committee looked at this and recommended approving it. That is the waiver with the conditions that the developer grades the land to allow this and provides a connection to the existing bike pedestrian trail that's located just south of that when the time comes. So they're anticipating that at some point getting hooked up, and
I would move to approve the waiver to section 22.06, sidewalks and bike paths regarding this particular property with the addition of the two recommendations by the Safe Routes Committee. And number one, to add that the future installation of sidewalks shall be borne by the property owner.
Second.
a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes,
Gulecki,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker.
Yes.
Doss,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes.
Bowen.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Item G is a tourism entity agreement renewal deadline. Tourism entity agreement requires notification of non-renewal of that agreement 18 months prior to its expiration. And we talked about that at the last meeting. In part because there were some concerns about the length of time for notification and some other things. Not that it's necessarily we're not going to renew, but rather that the agreement may be modified.
Under the 18-month provision, what would be that date?
June 1st. And so tonight, we don't necessarily have to have the new agreement. What we just simply need to do is give notice that we're not going to renew this agreement in this form. And we've already talked about having the tourism committee provide us with some recommendations of possible alterations to it. It doesn't seem likely to me that that entity would be anyone other than the chamber, and so it's just that the features of that agreement may change, or may not.
Is it necessary to say that we are not renewing it, or is it possible to say that we would like to have a discussion with the entity about changes?
Can't hear you down there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Is it necessary that we say we are not renewing it, or is it possible to say we would like to have a discussion with the tourism entity about changes to this agreement? I mean, is it either or? We have to announce that we're not renewing it, and then you have the discussion, or can we say, you know, this is coming up for renewal, and we would like to have some discussions with you about it before we sign another one?
And I think the mechanism by which you achieve that result is to decline to renew it.
But that's in its current form, and I think we need to understand that that's what we're saying. It's not that we're saying we don't want the chamber's entity, just that it's noticed that we'd like to change the contract.
Well, I think.
Well,
we're-
there, you know, you could decline to renew it and then 5 months from now decide to renew it on exactly the same terms, if that's what you wanted to do. But if you want to change it and you don't want this agreement to be like it is now, you have to non-renew it. You
Right.
have to say, we don't want to renew this.
And I think that's what we want to do, because one of the things we want to do is we want to change, at least has been discussion that we want to change the timeline from 18 months to a year at least. And I think we do want this discussion. So we have to, not renew.
Right,
Give them let them know that we're not
right,
going to
but people
renew.
need to understand that that's not the same thing as saying it's not going to be the chamber anymore. That's not what it says. It means it's simply that the agreement is likely to be recast in some form.
So, what type of a motion do we need here?
did you make a motion?
Motion not to renew.
I believe so.
I'll make that motion.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second not to renew. Discussion. Okay, roll call.
I
You
do have a
add,
question.
Okay.
Is the chamber aware that this is
I think
under
so,
discussion?
certainly.
Do we need to
Anybody from the
say,
chamber who might wanna speak
No,
to that?
but we have somebody from the committee, and besides myself, Arlene's on the committee.
do we want to say not to renew in its current form?
I think we want to say that we are not
the
going
same
to
thing.
renew the tourism entity agreement.
Yeah, I mean, the number 4 says it's renewed unless either party to this agreement with at least 18 months' notice declines the renewal provisions. So I guess the motion is you decline the renewal provisions of the tourism entity agreement dated October 21, 2010.
That's my motion.
And that's what I seconded.
So, and again, this is not, it's not what it sounds like, it's simply a procedural thing that we have to do. Any other discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Killian,
Yes?
Delecky,
Yes.
Steiner,
Yes.
Becker,
Yes?
Doss,
No,
Nichols,
Yes.
Nichols,
Yes, I'm sorry.
Bowen,
No.
motion carried.
Thank you. Under information and discussion items tonight, item A is the Southwestern Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission Comprehensive Plan Update.
Yeah, at a work session a while back, we had talked about getting the process going again to complete the update to the comprehensive plan. I outlined some steps that we should take to do that. The council seemed to be in agreement to start that process, so I received a proposal from the Southwest Wisconsin Regional Planning Commission to help us completing that plan update, and this is what they submitted, basically to go through the steps needed to update that. They would anticipate it being completed by the end of this year with an anticipated cost of $12,000, and that is what I had budgeted for in this current year budget.
Questions or? No. Item B is the change of collection agency for the Platteville Emergency Medical Service.
The Platteville EMS would like to change our collection agency from Tri-State Adjustments of La Crosse to a new billing provider, TSI. Let's see. We recommend a 2-year contract with TSI for collection of bad debt. Prior to renewing the contract, the performance of TSI will be evaluated and determined by the city if we wish to continue the contract for another 2-year period. The start date for the new contract would be July 1st, 2012.
I have a couple questions before, when we receive this information, next time if it's on for action, I'd like to know how many, I guess you contract a number of accounts, and I know 100 has been mentioned in here, and that's, the cost per account is $13.25, with perhaps a $1 discount. So I would like to know what is being proposed and see the dollar numbers. And then it also says that in order to receive that discounted rate, the Platteville EMS would have to become a member of the Professional Ambulance Association of Wisconsin. And I assume there's a cost to that, and I'm wondering what that cost is, or what that might mean in terms of responsibilities, if any, that the city or the EMS would have. So
Okay.
I'd like to have that information
I'll
when
add that
we
to the
bring
staff
this
note.
back to talk about it. Because there are no numbers in here now. When we're talking about renewing the contract, that's after we've already had the 2-year contract, so. Again, just having that information in our memo next time would be helpful.
Okay.
Any other questions on that? Item C under information is ordinance amending chapter 33 of the rental code. That's in the packet along with the changes that have been made, and they're stricken and highlighted. And Ken has also handed out a draft of some ideas about in regard to changing the fee structure, which people have not had a chance to read tonight. Ken, do you want to make any comments on that?
Well, I appreciate your study of this and get comments to me about this. This is in response to the city manager's letter. It's recommended change, I think it's number 5 in his January 1, 12 memo. And I give some discussion on these items. First on the revenue part. The average revenue is about $46,000 per year. So if we want to increase revenue by half, that's about $23,000. I make some recommended changes in basic fees, and then those are increases. Then the reward incentive program is a program whereby if certain criteria are followed, the fee would be reduced. Now, I talked with a couple of people. The landlords may feel that the fee should be reduced below the present level that the fee is at, which is $90 for 3 years. And that's not the situation here. So that is subject to debate as to how this should operate, whether it should be, say, decreasing to below the $90 or whatever. And then I go through the 5 criteria. One is no penalties from the special fee schedule given on page 3. You can study those over. Next is looking at parking requirement. And the reason I put in parking requirement is that if you look at, to me, in my opinion, when you look at rentals, 3 things stand out. I think the parking, next is the appearance of the structure, and third, I would say, be the appearance of the property. And if there's in my opinion, if there's a reward program, it should have criteria. There should be some incentive put in there for them to do, continue improvements, to do improvements. So that's why I'm putting in parking. I want to improve parking, improve appearance, and also such that there's a minimum of violations when the inspector comes to check the property for violations. Then the last one there is dealing with the occupancy limit. That's a difficult one to monitor, but the idea here is that the landlord is going to have to be proactive in helping to encourage, helping to control, helping to enforce, whatever word you want to use, helping to control the number of occupants in the rental units. And then in the back, I have some suggestions as far as the fee schedule for payment to the contractor. I'm suggesting that this remain the same for some units, and then for some that it be decreased. So this would be another way for the city to obtain some funds. And then there's one place in here I talk about this postcard system we were going to supposedly use. And so if we're going to put that system into place, into usage, we'll have to decide who's going to do it. And if the city does it, what's going to be the cost? And then if the city does it, then what's going to be reduction in the payment to the contractor as far as if the city does it? And then the last page is perhaps very controversial. That would be the general appearance condition rating scale. I would appreciate your comments to improve the scale. I have a scale of very good, average. For a property to qualify for reward, it'd have to be good or very good. It has to be above average. So those are some points from this proposal, this draft that I've made up together with input from staff. Staff has agreed with me some, but not completely. Thank you.
Other comments on the rental code or Ben's document?
I do have a question, and I will readily admit that I have not read all of these pages, but I do know that in a work session, we talked about the fact that, and I think Ken referenced it, that if you have a license expiring, a car license or a driver's license, you get a postcard and it says it's your responsibility. And I think one of the things we talked about is making the responsibility for scheduling the rental inspection belong not to the inspector, but to the person who owns the property, and having some kind of penalty associated, just like you would if you were driving an expired licensed car or driving with an expired license. So I will review this, but that is one thing that I will be looking for in this, is the implementation of that type of notification that puts the responsibility on the property owner. It should not be the city's responsibility to chase people down for these licenses, just like the DOT doesn't chase, well, they do chase you down, because Doug, I think that the police department will arrest you if you are driving a car without a license. So in that regard, I guess they do chase you down, but they don't chase you down and say, it's time for you to go renew. So I'd like to see that we make sure that that is implemented in this change in rental code.
Sounds like a
Hopefully
good
that's
idea.
underneath the special fee schedule.
I
that put
understand
in.
it's in yours. I don't know where it's at in the rental code.
Yeah,
It seems to me like it needs to be,
It
part
has a
of-
late fee in there, but I don't think it directly addresses that.
right.
I
I
don't
think
that's a
it
bad
talks
idea.
about, again, the inspector scheduling. And it shouldn't be the inspector scheduling. It should be the responsibility. I mean, there should be something in there about cards being, or notice being given to property owners, and they have so much time to schedule their appointment, and it's their responsibility to schedule it. And if they don't get it scheduled, then it's their fine. Yeah, we shouldn't be chasing people down. My understanding from our last discussion about this was the inspector calls and calls and calls and calls. And it's not convenient, and it's not convenient, and it's not convenient. Well, it's not necessarily convenient for me to go and have my driver's license renewed, but I don't guess I have that option of saying, geez, it wasn't convenient.
Let me ask this question. That sounds like a substantial enough change that I'm not sure that we'll be able to do that in an amendment form next time, or at least comfortable enough. Do we want to ask staff to come back with a revision that includes that, and then bring that back for information next time?
Sounds like a good plan to me.
Everybody else seem to find that to be comfortable?
Well, that's,
With the driver's license, I get a notice from the state that says your driver's license is expiring, and then I send in that little card. This is different. What you're saying is that somebody that has 15 rental properties or 5 or 3 or something, you want them to
They'll get
get it on there.
they'll get a card.
Well, if they get a card then and
They'll
say,
get a card from the city that says your license
Okay.
is expiring, and we would set it out, I guess, 90 days, or however, I mean, somebody's gonna have to come up with that time period. If it's 90 days,
But-
your license is expiring on,
Well,
you
we-
get it on October 1st.
That's
Your
what some-
license is expiring
we
on
get a notice
January
from the
1st.
city, you get a
Yep.
notice from the city, and there is another difference with your driver's license, you just send in a little card. But there's also the owner of the rental property has to contact inspector, and they have to make arrangements with inspectors, and it goes both ways. It isn't always the property owner that doesn't get the inspection done, sometimes it's the inspector that doesn't get it done. So it can go both ways.
But
We could ask that inspector to have specific hours they could be contacted, so we didn't play a lot of phone tag, or have an answering service that
Well,
would
one
do it or
time we were
something.
talked about having an inspector would have office hours in the city of Platteville too. We talked about that at one time. That never really developed along the lines, but
Well,
That was a thought at one time.
email can be read anywhere, anytime.
Barb, would you work with Joe to at least give him some specifics and ask Joe to
Sure.
make an amendment? Is that okay with everybody here?
I think
Try
we
to do that.
discussed this at our work session. I have the notes yet from our last meeting.
Okay, if we could come back with a modification for the next meeting
Well,
for
some of that's
information.
covered in the special fee schedule. We need to look at that. And I think, well, we need a work session on it.
Yeah, I mean,
want a work session. We got enough work
It's been a
sessions.
constant
I think if we delay it, I think if we don't try to act on it next month, if we try to have it back for information again next time, and then try to act on it the first meeting in June would seem to be reasonable, since it's a substantial change.
Well, let's see if we can't bring it back for information next time, and in the meantime, it'll be for information, and if folks would take a look at Ken's proposal here too, and come back with commentary on that.
Okay.
Good. Is there anything else? At this point, we'll end the televised portion of the meeting and go into a work session to discuss the Director of Administration job description. We'll take about a 5-minute break first. Thank you.